Hi again, Dave Blum here with Dr. Clue Team Building. In my last video, I talked about the 5 attitudes of a team. And those attitudes were the victim, the fighter, the rationalizer, the caregiver, and the opportunist. And today we're going to be talking about how we can coach our teams up. So wherever they're at, to boost them to the next level where they can be more productive. And that doesn't mean that a team is always, once it reaches the highest level, it is there forever. Teams fluctuate, they dive back down into the lower levels, and then we have to coach them back up, and we have to stay on it. But today we're going to talk about some of the tips for each level wherever your team is at. As you recall, kind of the lowest level attitude is the victim, and it's very ego-oriented. It's full of apathy, lethargy, and the prevailing slogan is, I lose. And when you have a team of people that are a lot of victims, or predominantly a victim attitude, you know you're in a little bit of trouble. It's going to take some work. You're going to have to let them vent, get it out there. You're going to have to acknowledge them and how well they're doing. You're going to have to validate them. And that means things like saying, it's perfectly understandable where you're at, right? So that they understand they're not alone. And then you have to reframe. You'd have to do a lot of reframing so they can see that there are other ways of looking at their situation, that there are different interpretations. But by and large, you just want to get them to stop beating themselves up and to start seeing other possibilities. And if it means giving them an opportunity to have sort of a venting session just so that they get into their fighter mode, that's better than having them be in a low energy victim mode. The second level attitude is the fighter, and as you recall, their main slogan is, you lose. Because it's a dog-eat-dog world when you're in the fighter mode. And if you've got a team that is all fighters, it looks like they're full of energy and that it's going to be so dynamic, but in fact, it has a kind of a destructive mode as well. Because there's no opportunity for cooperation, for collaboration, and also it's very, blamey, right? It's always other people are at fault. And so when you're trying to coach your team up beyond just a dog-eat-dog world fighting, you want to be emphasizing that that's not necessarily the case, that you should take responsibility for your part in whatever the conflict is, because there's always conflict when you're a fighter. So you take responsibility. What was your fault? What was the other person's fault? It's not always so black and white, win and lose. Like the victim, you also want to have them reframing, looking at things in other people's shoes. This is very important, right? If you want to get people past the fighter mode, they have to develop empathy. They have to see that other people have feelings, that they have a valid point, and if they were in those other shoes, how would it look? So it's very important to get people out of the fighter mode. As much as it is dynamic energy, it can also be destructive for what you're trying to accomplish. The fourth attitude is the rationalizer. And this one is also still a little bit me-centered. If you have a lot of rationalizers on the team, they're going to be looking at how they can benefit. So it's not as bad or as aggressive as the fighter and you lose, but it's still, the slogan is, I win. You can win too. It's okay if other people win, but I have to win. And so when you've got a group like that, couple things have to go on. Number one, you want to be emphasizing service, right? Because the next level up is the caregiver and service. So when you've got a group like this, you want to be saying, it's not, I know that you want to get your win and you want to succeed, but what about if you surrendered that and volunteered and thought about just being of benefit to others? We all know what this is like when we are raising kids, right? So you want to do that. And then the other thing, of course, is that this is the attitude of the rationalizer, which means they set the bar low. And so you want to be holding out a big, strong vision and saying, don't stop here. The fourth attitude is the caregiver. And their attitude is, you win, which is a lovely place to be. But caregivers, as we know, sometimes have a hard time taking care of themselves, as we all know. So a time-worn expression is that you can't take care of others until you take care of yourself, and that's what caregivers sometimes forget. So you want to be sure that a caregiver understands that a win-win situation is just as acceptable as you win. It's okay to win for yourself. That's how advanced the caregiver is, that they're no longer trying to win for themselves and maybe they go too far. So you definitely want to work on them with that. And also just taking responsibility and looking for more opportunities. In whatever happens, everything is an opportunity. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with caregivers, there is a tendency to drop down when they're not appreciated, and all of a sudden they become level 1 or level 2, they become fighters and they become victims. And so you want to make sure that they can keep everything in context, that even as they're giving, they're not always going to be 100% appreciated, and so they have to take care of themselves a little bit. So that's how you coach up a level 4 caregiver group. Finally, there is the highest attitude, the level 5 attitude, which is the attitude of the opportunist, which everything is an opportunity. And it's just a series of events, not good, not bad, but all an opportunity. This is really where you want to have your team operating. This is the attitude that you're trying to cultivate. There's only one thing about this. Sometimes when you have a group this high, they become a little bit detached. Because it's win-win. Everything is win-win, and they're just enjoying the experience no matter what happens. They can look a little bit distant. You know, we can all identify with someone who's got their dander up, who's upset. We can even identify with someone who's like, oh, poor me, because their emotions are on their sleeve. But when you're at that level 5, your emotions are pretty calm, pretty cool, pretty zen, but maybe it's hard to identify with them. And so you want to actually work with the level 5 people to remember the heart that came from the level 4, from the caregiver, to get in touch with the heart so that we can identify with them and they don't just become cool, detached Mr. Spock, all logic. So that's how you coach up your team. You identify the attitudes and then you think, I like where they're at, but I think we could be even higher. We could do even more. But you have to apply the proper psychology. And like I said, it's very contagious. Very often it's not just one bad egg. You get all these people because similarity attracts similarity, like attracts like, and all of a sudden you've got a team all with a similar attitude, which could be a good thing, could be a positive thing if you've got everybody who's level 4 or level 5. So you want to coach the attitudes up, and if you coach 1 or 2, the whole thing gets lifted up. So I challenge you to identify and diagnose your team. Figure out what the prevailing attitude is, and then really think carefully of what can I do for them to coach them up so they get to the next level, and eventually get to level 5 and beyond. And there is a beyond, you know. If you're at level 6 or level 7, you would be Jesus or Allah or the Buddha. But for the time being, here on this particular astral space or frame, we want to, we're aiming for the 5th attitude of opportunist. And I think that's a great place to be. Dave Blum with Dr. Clue, and look forward to my next video. Bye-bye.